Just sign the damn papers, Eric. Wendy, my daughter-in-law's voice cut through the fog in my head like a knife. I was lying in this hospital bed, unable to move, unable to scream, and my daughter-in-law was standing 3 feet away, arguing with my son Eric about how fast they could pull my life support. The lawyer said we have 72 hours before it gets complicated, she said. $4 million, Eric. 4 million. We sign now. We're in California by summer. My son hesitated, just for a second. Then I heard it. The click of a pen. They thought I couldn't hear them. They were wrong. And in that moment, I couldn't describe what I felt. Anger that my son would rather sign those documents without knowing if I would survive, or relief that if anything happened to me, my grandchildren would have something to cover them. If you've ever felt completely powerless, like no one could hear you when you needed them most, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will shock you. Have you ever had someone close to you betray your trust? Let me know in the comments. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Pamela Webb. I'm 56 years old. I've lived in Brooklyn my entire life. I raised my son Eric as a single mother after my husband passed away when Eric was just 8 years old. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs to give him everything he needed. I put him through college. I helped him with the down payment on his first house. I was there when he got married, when his children were born, for every milestone and every moment that mattered. 3 days ago, I was driving home from my book club. It was a regular Tuesday evening, nothing special. Just another ordinary night in my ordinary life. I remembered discussing the latest mystery novel we'd read, a thriller about a woman who disappeared without a trace. We'd all been so invested in figuring out the twist. I remembered laughing with the other women about how every single one of us had guessed the wrong ending. Sarah had been convinced it was the husband. Margaret swore it was her best friend. I'd put my money on the neighbour. We were all wrong, and we'd spent 20 minutes debating the clues we'd missed. The roads were quiet as I drove through the Brooklyn streets I'd known for decades. Streetlights cast their familiar orange glow. I passed the corner store where I'd bought ice cream for Sophie and Noah just last weekend. I passed the park where I'd taught Eric to ride his bike when he was 7 years old, running behind him with my hand on the seat until he was steady enough to go on his own. I was thinking about Sophie's dance recital coming up that weekend. My 5-year-old granddaughter had been practicing her routine for weeks, twirling around my living room in her little pink tutu, her face so serious and focused as she tried to remember every step. She'd made me watch her practice at least a dozen times. "Grandma, watch this part. Grandma, did you see my spin? Grandma, do you think Miss Rebecca will be proud of me?" I'd promised her I'd be sitting in the front row cheering her on. I'd even bought a new camera just for the occasion because my phone camera wasn't good enough to capture every precious moment. Then a truck ran a red light. I didn't even see it coming. 1 second I was thinking about my granddaughter's dance recital, planning what time I needed to leave to get good seats, wondering if I should bring flowers for her. The next second, there were blinding headlights in my peripheral vision and the deafening blare of a horn. The impact was so violent that my car spun twice before slamming into a telephone pole. I remembered every terrible second of it, the screech of metal tearing apart like paper, the explosion of the airbag against my face, the chemical smell of it deploying, the sound of glass shattering all around me, thousands of pieces raining down like deadly rain, the sensation of my body being thrown sideways, the seatbelt cutting into my chest and shoulder, the world spinning, spinning, spinning until I didn't know which way was up. Then nothing. Just darkness. Complete and absolute. When I woke up here at St. Mary's Hospital, woke up wasn't the right word for what happened to me. I didn't wake up the way you wake up from sleep, stretching and yawning and slowly coming back to consciousness. I became aware. It was like being pulled up from the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. One moment there was nothing, and the next moment I could hear voices and beeping machines and the hum of fluorescent lights. But I was conscious, trapped inside my own body like a prisoner with no way out, no way to signal to anyone that I was still in here. The doctors told my family I was in a vegetative state. No awareness, no hope, no point in keeping me alive. That was their professional assessment, delivered with sympathy, but also with certainty. Clean, clinical, final. They spoke about brain scans and neurological damage and the likelihood of recovery, which they said was essentially non-existent. But they were wrong. I could hear every single word they were saying, every conversation, every whispered discussion in the corner of my hospital room, every assessment, every prognosis, every terrible word. I just couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't reach out and grab their hands and scream that I was still here, still present, still fighting. The machines beeped steadily around me, marking time in a way that made every second feel like an eternity. I felt everything. The scratch of the rough hospital sheets against my skin, the way they bunched up under my back, the sharp smell of antiseptic that burned the inside of my nose, mixing with the smell of floor cleaner and something else, something that smelled like sickness and fear. The bitterness of the breathing tube lodged in my throat, making me want to gag, but unable to even do that. The weight of the thin hospital blanket over my legs, the itch on my nose that I couldn't scratch, the dryness in my mouth. Every sensation was crystal clear, vivid, real, undeniable. But my eyes wouldn't open. No matter how hard I tried to force them, to will my eyelids to just lift, they stayed closed. My fingers wouldn't curl. I couldn't make a fist, or wiggle my fingers, or do anything to signal that I was conscious. My lips wouldn't move. I couldn't form words, or make sounds, or even take a breath on my own outside of the ventilator's rhythm. I screamed inside my head. I screamed until I thought my mind would shatter from the effort. I begged my hand to just move. Just one finger. Just the tiniest twitch. Squeeze something. Anything. Blink an eye. Raise a finger. Do something to show them I was still in here. That I was still Pamela, still their mother, still their grandmother, still alive in every way that mattered, even if my body had betrayed me. But nothing happened. My body had become a coffin, and I was buried alive inside it, sealed in, locked away, screaming into darkness that no one could hear. And it got worse. So much worse. Because the two people I trusted most in this world, the two people who should have been fighting for me, who should have been demanding more tests and second opinions and refusing to give up, were standing over my grave deciding how fast to shovel in the dirt. They weren't holding my hand. They weren't sitting beside my bed reading to me or playing my favorite music or talking to me about memories. They weren't crying. They weren't praying for me to come back, for a miracle, for just one more chance. They were arguing about money. I was supposed to pick up Sophie from dance class that day. It was Tuesday, and Tuesdays were our special day. My granddaughter was 5 years old, and she was probably standing in that studio in her little leotard and tights, her dance bag at her feet, watching the door and wondering where Grandma was. She was probably asking her teacher, Miss Rebecca, if I was coming. My grandma always picks me up on Tuesdays. Where is she? Maybe she cried when I didn't show up. Maybe she thought I'd forgotten about her, broken my promise, chosen something else over her. And 3-year-old Noah. I'd promised him we'd go to the park this weekend to feed the ducks. It was his favourite thing in the entire world. He loved watching them paddle across the pond, their little webbed feet moving under the water. He loved throwing pieces of bread and giggling when they quacked at him and swam over in an excited cluster. He'd made me promise at least 5 times over the past week, holding up his little hand with all 5 fingers spread out. "You promise, Grandma? You really, really promise? Pinky promise." And I'd hooked my pinky around his tiny one and said, "I promise, sweetheart. This weekend, just you and me and the ducks." I'd promised. Instead, I was here, trapped in this hospital bed in the ICU, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to tell anyone I was still here. Listening to his parents, my son and daughter-in-law, planned my funeral before I was even dead. "Just sign the damn papers, Eric." Wendy, my daughter-in-law's voice cut through the fog in my head like a knife. I was lying in this hospital bed, unable to move, unable to scream, and my daughter-in-law was standing 3 feet away, arguing with my son Eric about how fast they could pull my life support. "The lawyer said we have 72 hours before it gets complicated," she said. $4 million, Eric. 4 million. We sign now, we're in California by summer." "Wendy, keep your voice down," Eric hissed. I realized then that this wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. This was just the first time Wendy had lost her patience. "We've been over this," Eric continued. "The initial consent forms get us in the queue, but the actual withdrawal doesn't happen until the 48-hour waiting period is up. We're doing this by the book." Doing this by the book. He was talking about killing me like it was a business transaction. "The book?" Wendy's voice dripped with contempt. "Your mother is costing us $12,000 a day in this ICU, Eric. Every day we wait for money out of our pockets. The insurance won't pay out until she's gone. The estate is frozen. And meanwhile, we're hemorrhaging cash we don't have. $12,000 a day. That was what my life was worth to her. A line item on a budget, an expense to be eliminated." I heard footsteps then. The soft squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the rustle of scrubs. A nurse had entered the room. Wendy went quiet immediately. The shift was instant, professional, careful. They waited in silence while the nurse checked something on my IV. I felt a slight tug on my arm. Then she adjusted one of the monitors. The beeping changed rhythm for just a second, then settled back. The nurse left. The door clicked shut. The mask dropped again. "The brownstone in Brooklyn alone is worth $1.3 million in this market," Wendy continued. Her voice was level now, controlled, businesslike. "Plus the 2 investment properties in Queens, the stock portfolio, the retirement accounts. Your mother was smart, I'll give her that. But she's gone, Eric. The doctors said 0 brain activity. We're not killing her. We're just stopping the machines from pretending. 0 brain activity. That was what the doctors had told them. But I was right here. I was listening to every word." "I know," Eric said quietly. "My son. The boy I'd rocked to sleep when he had nightmares. The man I'd taught to ride a bike, holding the seat steady until he found his balance. The father of my grandchildren. I just thought there'd be more time to prepare," he added. "To process. We've had 3 days. How much processing do you need?" Wendy's patience was razor thin now. "We already contacted the realtor. Steve's ready to list the brownstone the day after the funeral. We've got the estate sale company on standby. I talked to your mum's financial advisor. He said with proper planning, we're looking at minimal estate taxes. This is happening, Eric. The question is whether you're on board or whether you want to throw away the chance we've been waiting for." Waiting for. Those words hit me like a second crash. They'd been waiting for me to die. This wasn't grief. This wasn't a difficult decision made in the fog of tragedy. This was a plan, a calculation. They'd been waiting for their chance, and my accident had finally given it to them. And think about Sophie and Noah, Wendy added. My heart clenched. Don't you dare use my grandchildren to justify this. With this money, we can move them to that private school in San Diego, she continued. No more struggling with daycare costs. We can set up their college funds properly. Your mother would want that for them. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach through this paralysis and shake them both. How dare she speak for me? How dare she pretend this was about my grandchildren when all she cared about was money? If this story is making your blood boil, hit that subscribe button because you need to hear how this ends. Then I heard another voice. Dr. Patterson. I recognized his deep voice from the morning rounds. He was kind, professional, and he had absolutely no idea what these two really wanted. Mr. Webb, Mrs. Webb, he said, I have the initial consent documentation for withdrawal of life support. I want to be very clear about the timeline. You'll sign these today, which starts the process. Hospital protocol requires a 48-hour waiting period and an ethics consultation before we proceed with actual withdrawal. This gives everyone time to be absolutely certain, and it allows for any family members who want to say goodbye. 48 hours. I had 48 hours before they killed me. We're certain, Wendy said immediately. I understand this is incredibly difficult, Dr. Patterson continued gently. Your mother's neurological assessments show no response to stimuli, no purposeful movement, and the EEG indicates severe impairment. Given the extent of her injuries, the likelihood of meaningful recovery is, unfortunately, essentially zero. Essentially zero. Not actually zero. There was still a chance, a sliver of possibility, but they didn't care. Where do we sign? That was Wendy again. Always Wendy pushing, always Wendy in control. I heard the scratch of pen on paper, once, twice, 3 times. Take your time, son, Dr. Patterson said. But Eric didn't take time. He signed. Right there. Right then. My death warrant, written in ink, 48 hours away from becoming real. Sophie and Noah were about to lose their grandmother, and their father had just traded me for California real estate and private school tuition. Dr. Patterson started explaining the next steps, the timeline, the procedures. His voice was gentle, sympathetic, completely unaware that he was helping 2 people commit murder for money. Then another voice interrupted. Younger, female, urgent, and slightly out of breath. Dr. Patterson, wait, don't file those orders yet. Dr. Lavallee, what's going on? I'm Dr. Eva Lavallee from Neurology, the woman said. I was reviewing Mrs. Webb's fMRI scans this morning, the advanced imaging we ran at 6 a.m. Something's not adding up with her diagnosis. The room went still. I felt the air change, charged with sudden tension. What do you mean, not adding up? Dr. Patterson's voice was sharp now. Professional concern replaced his gentle bedside manner. Her brain activity patterns are completely inconsistent with a vegetative state, Dr. Lavallee said. I'm seeing neural activation in areas associated with conscious awareness, language processing, and even emotional response. What you're describing clinically sounds much more like locked-in syndrome than persistent vegetative state. Locked-in syndrome. I didn't know what that meant, but I heard the words conscious awareness, and hope flooded through me like electricity. What's the difference? Eric asked. I heard confusion in his voice. Maybe a thread of worry. Dr. Lavallee moved closer. I felt her presence near the bed. Locked-in syndrome means the patient is fully conscious and aware, but unable to move or communicate due to paralysis, she explained. Vegetative state means no awareness at all. They're completely different conditions with completely different prognoses. One is a person trapped in their body. The other is, well, essentially what you were told. But the other doctors said, Wendy started. The other doctors were working with preliminary assessments. Dr. Laverley cut her off. The fMRI tells a different story. Mrs. Webb's brain is active. She could potentially be hearing everything we're saying right now. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear Wendy's heart stop. Dr. Patterson cleared his throat. Dr. Laverley, that's a very serious claim. Are you certain? Certain enough to halt any withdrawal proceedings until we run definitive tests, she said firmly. I need to check for volitional eye movement, which is the classic sign of locked-in syndrome. If she can control her eyes, she's conscious. I felt hands on my face then. Gentle, purposeful. Dr. Laverley's voice was close now, speaking directly to me. For the first time in 3 days, someone was talking to me instead of about me. Pamela, my name is Dr. Eva Laverley, she said. If you can hear me and understand me, I need you to try something very specific. Don't try to move your arms or legs or head. Just focus on your eyes. I'm going to ask you yes or no questions. Move your eyes up for yes, down for no. Do you understand me, Pamela? With every molecule of will I possessed, every ounce of rage and fear and desperate hope, I focused on my eyes. Up, up, move up. I thought of Sophie's dance recital. I thought of Noah's laughter at the park. I thought of holding my grandchildren again. Nothing. I tried again. Up. Please. Up. Wait. Dr. Laverley breathed. Did you see that? Pamela, do it again. Up for yes. Can you hear me? Up. This time I felt it. The tiniest movement. The smallest flutter of control I'd had in 3 days. Oh my God, Dr. Patterson whispered. She's responding. Pamela, one more time. Dr. Laverley's voice shook with excitement. Are you aware? Can you understand us? Up. Yes. I'm here. I'm alive. I heard everything. I want to see my grandchildren again. She's in there, Dr. Laverley announced, and her voice rang with authority now. She's fully conscious. This woman has been aware this entire time. I heard a crash. Something hitting the floor. Wendy must have dropped her purse or phone. Eric made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a gasp and a sob. Dr. Laverley kept talking, professional and firm. We need to get her to do advanced imaging immediately, and someone needs to notify the hospital ethics board that we have a conscious patient, not a vegetative one. Those consent forms are void. Would you trust your family with your life? Let me know in the comments, because what I discovered next destroyed everything I thought I knew about the people I loved. Over the next 6 hours, though time blurred in the endless white of hospital rooms, my world transformed completely. More specialists came, more tests were run. And then finally, someone wheeled in a computer tablet mounted on an adjustable arm. Dr. Laverley positioned it in front of my face. Pamela, this is eye tracking technology, she explained. The camera follows your eye movement, and you can select letters on the screen by looking at them. It's going to be slow at first, but you'll get faster. Are you ready to talk to us? I looked at yes on the screen. The keyboard appeared. Letter by letter, painstakingly slow, I spelled out my first message. It took almost 10 minutes. My eyes moved from letter to letter, and the computer registered each one. I, H, E, A, R, D, E, V, E, R, Y, T, H, I, N, G. Dr. Laverley read it aloud. There was a crash from the doorway. Wendy had dropped a coffee cup. It shattered on the linoleum floor, and no one moved to clean it up. Mrs. Webb, Dr. Laverley said softly, We're going to help you communicate everything you need to say. You're not alone anymore. Do you understand? I started spelling again. THEYWAYDENTEEDEADFORMONEY. Dr. Patterson's voice was tight when he spoke. Someone gets hospital security and calls the patient advocate office. Now. Eric finally came back into the room 2 hours later. I heard him pull up a chair. His breathing was ragged, uneven. Wendy wasn't with him. She'd been asked to wait outside. "Mum?" he started, and his voice cracked. "Mum? I don't know what to say. I thought you were gone. I swear, I thought you were already gone." I spelled slowly, deliberately. "You talked about California before asking for a second option." He made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. "That's not... We were just planning for after. We thought it was already over." "You wanted it to be over," I said slowly. "No." He stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "No, Mum. That's not fair. The doctors told us you had no brain activity. We weren't just making this up. We were following medical advice." I asked a question. "What did you tell Sophia and Noah?" He froze, completely still. "I told them you were sleeping in the hospital, that you'd be home soon." W-I-L. L-I? Before he could answer, Wendy appeared in the doorway. Security had tried to keep her out, but she'd pushed through. Her voice was defensive, sharp. "Pamela, you have to understand," she said. "We were told by doctors that you were gone. We were trying to do what was compassionate. No one wants to see someone they love suffer. And we have Sophie and Noah to think about. Their future. Their education." I spelled out my response. Dr. Laverly read each letter aloud as I selected it, making Wendy hear every single word. "You called the realtor before I was even cold." Wendy's face went white. "How did you—" "She can hear," Dr. Laverly said coldly. "She heard everything, every conversation, every plan, every word, including how you were going to use her grandchildren's education as justification. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button because what the detectives discovered next will blow your mind." Over the following week, as I regained tiny movements, a finger twitch, a slight head turn, the beginning of facial control, the full scope of their planning emerged. The hospital social worker mentioned in her report that Eric and Wendy had contacted Steve Carmichael, a realtor, 3 days after my accident. 3 days. They'd scheduled an estate sale company. They'd even picked out cremation urns and memorial service venues. But Detective Rivera... Yes, there was a detective now, because the hospital had reported suspected elder abuse. He told me something worse. "Mrs. Webb," he said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "We pulled your insurance records. 2 months before your accident, your policy was increased from $1 million to $4 million. The application has your signature, but our handwriting analyst says it's a forgery. Your son had power of attorney for healthcare decisions, but not for financial ones. This changes everything." 2 months. They'd been planning this for 2 months. While I was babysitting Sophie and Noah. While I was reading them bedtime stories and taking them to the playground. While I was baking cookies with Sophie and teaching Noah his colors. While I thought my son loved me. Detective Rivera continued. "We're also looking into whether the accident itself was truly accidental. Your car's brake lines showed signs of tampering, but the evidence is inconclusive. Were you having any mechanical problems before the crash?" I spelled out my answer. The car was fine. Eric borrowed it. 2 days before the detective's pen stopped moving, he looked up at me, and I saw the realization dawn in his eyes. "We're going to need you to give a full statement, Mrs. Webb," he said quietly. "Take your time." We'll get every word. Have you ever discovered something that made you question everything you thought you knew about someone? Drop a comment below, because the final chapter of this story will leave you speechless. It took 7 months, but I did recover. Not fully. My right side remained weak. My speech was slurred and slow. I needed a walker to move around. But I was alive. I was here. I was awake. The locked-in syndrome was temporary, thank God. The neurological damage was healing, slowly but steadily. I did physical therapy 5 days a week. I relearned how to write my own name, how to drink from a cup without spilling, how to say full sentences instead of just spelling them letter by letter. Eric and Wendy didn't visit after that first week. They hired a lawyer instead. A good one. I asked about Sophie and Noah constantly, every single day. My lawyer told me Wendy's parents were watching them while the case unfolded. She wouldn't let me see them. She said it would be traumatic for the children to see their grandmother like this. The truth was, she didn't want them to see me at all. The legal system moved like molasses, but it moved. Insurance fraud, forged documents, attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The brake line tampering evidence was circumstantial, so there were no attempted murder charges. But the district attorney made it clear. They were waiting for me to die, and they tried to speed up the process. 18 months after I woke up in that hospital bed, Eric pleaded guilty to insurance fraud and forgery. He got 3 years probation and had to repay the money he'd already spent from my accounts. Turns out he'd been withdrawing funds using that forged power of attorney for months. Thousands of dollars. Gone. Wendy took a plea deal. She moved back to Ohio, to her parents' place, taking Sophie and Noah with her. I never saw my grandchildren again. The court granted me visitation rights. But Wendy moved 3 times in 2 years. Always with new addresses, new phone numbers. My lawyer said we could pursue it, but it would take years and cost money I was now spending on medical care and therapy. Sophie was 7 now. Noah was 5. They probably didn't remember Grandma Pamela, who used to take them for ice cream and read them stories about dragons and princesses. They probably didn't remember the woman who pushed them on the swings and helped Sophie practice her dance moves and taught Noah how to count. Eric called sometimes. The phone rang. I saw his name on the caller ID and I let it go to voicemail. He left messages, apologizing, explaining, begging, asking if he could bring the kids to visit. I didn't call back. Maybe someday I will. But not today, not this year. Maybe not ever. I sat in my living room now, the brownstone they wanted to sell, the home I raised my son in, the house where Sophie took her first steps, wobbling across the hardwood floor with her arms stretched out toward me, the place where Noah learned to say grandma for the first time. And I thought about what I learned in that hospital bed. I learned that silence can be the cruelest prison, that being trapped inside your own body, unable to scream, unable to move, unable to tell anyone you're still there, is a special kind of hell. I learned that money reveals who people really are, that $4 million was apparently more valuable than a mother's life and a grandmother's love, that greed can turn a son into a stranger and grandchildren into bargaining chips. And I learned that the will to survive, to expose the truth, can be stronger than any paralysis. That even when your body fails you, when you're trapped in darkness with no way out, the human spirit can find a way to fight back. Some betrayals, even when you survive them, leave scars that never fully heal. Some silences, once broken, can never be forgotten. And some families, once shattered, can never be made whole again. But I was still here. I was still breathing. And every single day, that was enough. Even if Sophie and Noah never knew it. If this story moved you, Please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Have you ever discovered something about someone you trusted that completely changed how you saw them? What would you have done in my position? Let me know in the comments below.